are kind of hit or miss for me. So I don't know. We'll see. Maybe it'll change.
Get on the Incredicoaster coaster and stay on it the whole time.
Yeah.
We must have rode that thing like, I don't know, 15 times in 2 days. It's always a short wait too, which is awesome.
What I would really love to do, they revamped the Jurassic Park ride at Universal.
Mm-hmm.
If I could jump on that, man, like 100 times, I'd do it in a heartbeat.
Where do you guys live in the States, right?
Mm-hmm.
Where are you guys? Where do you? Where's your outpost? I guess.
I'm located in Vegas.
Hmm.
Row is Chicago, in the heart of that land.
Nice.
What do you call it, Row? Chicagoland?
Chicago.
Okay.
We call it Chicago.
Chicago. And Rob, I'm not sure, you're from Ohio or something, right?
No, Lansing, Michigan.
Michigan.
Michigan. Okay.
Again, not from Ohio.
And I'm the only Canadian here. There you go. I'm gonna say A way too much.
Yeah,
from the Great White North.
Yeah,
Yes, sir.
My man.
Kind of like honorary Canadians. So.
All right, guys. Let's start. I just started the broadcast. We got some people in the chat. Everybody, thank you for joining. All right,
just
welcome,
so you know,
Scuttle Buddies.
Just
Sorry?
to let you know, you can't type in chat, so don't think your situation's busted.
Okay, no worries.
You guys feel free to point something out in the chat, and we can definitely put it up on screen and discuss a couple things. So here we are. We're live. I need to open up my Corona, not the virus.
Yeah, don't open that up.
Don't open that up.
Yeah, unsplash screen if you could.
Yeah. So welcome, Scuttle Buddies, to my weekly Scarif side chats, where we talk and interact with our Star Wars sun here on Scarif. Is that the sun? It looks like a beam of light coming down from a space station, maybe. Hey, everybody. Maybe it'll pass. Yeah. We start and bring up our panel here tonight and introduce them. I want to just remind everybody, especially thank you for trying us out. We hope you'll see talk Star Wars, but remember, we also have a podcast, which is also available on iTunes, Spotify, Pandora, Stitch, SoundCloud, iHeartRadio, YouTube, and the Dantooin's Hollow News Network. That last one I just made up. Maybe. But thank you guys for joining us. So if you like tonight's experience, please tell a friend, tag a friend, drag a friend. Kicking and screaming, the more the merrier here on the Scarif Scuttle. Isn't that right, Alex? How's it going?
Hey, what's up, buddy? How are you?
Good. How I am good. So tonight we have a special show. They're all special shows. Come on, we have a lot of fun when we're talking. When we're doing these things. We got Rob from the Jedi Temple podcast. How are you, Rob?
No complaints. Thanks for letting me join in kind of late in the game there, Ro.
Oh, no, not a problem. And newcomer to our live chat, Dan from Voice of the Force podcast. How are you, Dan?
Not too bad. Getting through the nice, cool weather up here, but it's not always sunny in Canada, but it's close enough.
That's okay. We got. I'm here in Chicago. We get all seasons. Sometimes we get all seasons in one day, plus construction. That's what they say in Chicago.
Yeah, we have.
What's up, everybody in the chat?
Hey, chat. How's it going, guys?
So, I wanted to just touch base real fast. We hit a really great milestone today. We hit 1,500 followers.
Nice.
From our little campaign. Hashtag Road to 15. Thank you guys very much Thank you guys in the chat and some of you guys that follow us already that were able to help us. Grab some friends and let them know about us. We're always very happy to accommodate everybody and then talk to everybody on the channel. So thank you guys very much. It's really great stuff, man. We kind of coined a little descriptor on our end, pod people. And made some really great connections with other pod people, Star Wars content creators, and it has really been a blast. And speaking of pod people, Alex, how did it go today? People may or may not know you are the salty nerd, as your shirt says behind you. How did it go this morning?
We had a great podcast today. Me and my crew, we sat down, we talked about Colin Trevorrow's episode 9 script and the leaked concept art, which was awesome. Maybe we can talk about that tonight. Some of those images that they had on the concept art was just incredible. And I really liked the direction that he was taking the story. And I posed a very interesting question to my crew that I would like to pose to you guys tonight once we get talking about that subject, about the fandom and our reaction to Rise of Skywalker versus Last Jedi, and then mixing in Colin Trevorrow's. It's a really interesting topic, and I think it'll be a lot of fun to get a bunch of perspectives on it and people in the chats as well. And we talked about Jurassic Park for a little while, which was awesome, of course. And we did some shout outs to our Patreons. Ro, you are one of them. You are one of our top patrons. And that shirt right there that you guys are looking at, the Salty Justice Warrior, is Ro's shirt. It'll be in the mail pretty soon and being shipped to you. Thank you for contributing to the Salty Nerd podcast, Ro. Really appreciate it and your continued support. You got to be one of the number one fans. You've been there since the beginning, and then we touched base, and here we are working together.
You know, it's funny. It's a weird thing to actually interact and have a podcast with you, Alex, because I found the Salty Nerd podcast years ago, and I'm like, oh, this is a really cool podcast. They get right to the point, no BS. They don't talk about sports for the first 22 minutes, and then they talk about stuff. So that I kind of appreciate that as a non-sports Star Wars fan. So thank you very much for that. But Dan, tell us a little bit about Voice of the Force podcast. Where are you guys at, and what do you guys talk about?
Sure. Yeah, we're based out in Ontario here in Canada. We started it last September, so about a year worth of podcasts. We split it up into 2 shows. One is the main discussion show that we have, and the other one is the Star Wars canon kind of feel for it. So you cover books, comics, movies, stuff like that, TV shows. And that one's called Temple Archives. And we've been doing that for, since September of last year. We have about, 20-something episodes out, I think. Last episode, we had a few guests on, and we talked about season 1 of Mandalorian, and went through each episode of that. That was our biggest episode, longest episode that I've edited. But it's been a lot of fun, and just kind of getting involved in the Star Wars community in a different way. It's been a blast getting to know people, and finally getting to meet you guys and discuss Star Wars in a new way as well.
That's the cool thing about, our little group. Just to be able to meet all these people. We've collaborated with Rob from the Jedi Temple Archives. He came down here Chicago when we did our live event here at one of the comic book stores. It was a great opportunity to meet a lot of people that follow us, especially here in Chicago. And we had he's a visual effects artist from ILM, come down and just kind of join us and chat with us. It was a lot of fun. So it is, I'll second that, and I'll say it is a very fascinating way to meet people, like-minded Star Wars fans and geeks and nerds and stuff. Really, a really rewarding. Like you said, you get to meet a lot of really cool people.
That's for sure.
Rob, how about you? I loved your last show, the Mando Mercs, and your interview with. It was really fascinating stuff, and I like listening to that.
Yeah, I just always like the Mando Mercs. I mean, every time I go to an event and they're there, they're just super friendly. They obviously do a great job with the kits that they put together. And it's as much as I love the 501st, I like the fact that with the Mandalorian Mercs, you have a lot more freedom, I guess, to kind of customize your armor. You're not having to role play as a particular character or a particular classification of character. So it can be as diverse as the various clans that we see. And they were great. She gave me all the information on how people can get out there and find them and get going. And they will help you build your armor. And it's definitely something that if you're into cosplay, that it may be worth looking into.
It's funny because I was listening to them and I'm like, I'm one of those guys, every time my wife and I go to Home Depot and and there's other guys, grabbing lumber and nails and stuff, and she jokes around. She goes, "See, aren't you gonna, don't you know what to do here?" I'm like, "I'm just not that kind of Mexican. I'm sorry."
Nice.
So listening to the everybody talk about the vacuum forming and the plastic molding, and it starts out as a sheet. That's a lot of work.
Mm-hmm.
I got to give it to them. Everybody that gets together and puts those costumes together, and obviously I've seen them in person, and sometimes they're better than movie quality. Really, a lot of work and a lot of effort goes into those costumes, and I enjoy seeing them. I'd rather just have. Yeah.
I was gonna say, have you guys seen the Mercs, the Mandalorians that have like the metal set of armor, like full metal armor? They are ridiculous. We met one on the flight down to one of the Star Wars celebrations, and he had his helmet as his carry-on. It was like 30 pounds of just metal.
Wow.
It was awesome. Yeah, I couldn't believe it.
That's awesome.
This is the way.
Yeah,
Yes,
they were so hugely highlighted at Celebration 2019 with the Mandalorian panel, and they had their contingent out there in the crowd pumping their helmets and getting all riled up. And
Oh yeah.
one of the cool things about that interview with Casey was that she was actually one of those Mandos out in the crowd, and that was one of her highlight moments of the entire time she's been with the Mandalorians. So they're Clan Tracor, and just a great group.
Yeah, I was in the stands when that happened, so I saw the Mandalorians just lift up their helmets. It was quite a scene to behold.
Yeah.
So, guys in the chat, we're going to talk a little bit about Rise of Skywalker. We've got this group, and I know people are talking about it still. I think in some places it's still in theaters. It's kind of starting to trail off. But Dan, give us a little bit of like the cliff notes of your fandom. How did you get roped into Star Wars?
Easy enough. When I was young, my dad gave me the special edition set, VHS set of episode 4, 5, 6. And I watched those every night. I had a TV in my room and a VHS player. I play them every night and wake up in the morning and there's a blue screen in front of you. And you got to rewind it for those who didn't know. And just kind of watching those over and over again. I am probably the youngest here, I would assume. I was about 8 years old when episode 1 came out. And going to see that in theaters, seeing the first Star Wars movie I could in theaters was awesome. And it was all thanks to my dad and my mom and just showing me that series. And making friends throughout that kind of process at school and kind of talking to them about it and experimenting with, pretending that you're Luke Skywalker or Darth Vader or whatever, and just doing a whole bunch of fun stuff with your friends. It just kind of makes your fandom its own unique thing. And that's what happened to me.
Yeah, that's great. That's great. And so VHS was your foray into Star Wars. It's pretty, very interesting.
Yeah, it wasn't no Betamax, but it was VHS. So. But now that we got the Blu-ray sets and it's on Disney Plus, we can watch it anytime, which is kind of crazy.
Yeah, anytime. Roll.
Watch on your phone anywhere. So it's been fun.
Speaking of Disney, the Mandalorian is over with, season 1. What did you guys think of the first season? Rob, let's start with you, real fast.
Love the Mandalorian. I think there was only really one episode that I thought was kind of weak, and that was the little foray into Tatooine. But other than that, with that little kind of setback, at least in my eye, it then jumped into episode 6, 7, and 8. They were all incredibly strong. So it left me wanting more for sure. Looking forward to season 2 of that, and then hopefully we'll get some announcements on when the Cassian Andor series and Kenobi and some of the other content's going to be coming along.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to Cassian for many reasons, but yeah. And then Deborah Chow heading Obi-Wan Kenobi. That should be really fantastic too. Alex, quick thoughts on The Mandalorian?
I had a blast with it. I think Jon Favreau and Dave Filoni are the curators of future Star Wars, and I wish them all the luck in the world for that. And a quick story, I think we've talked about my opinion on The Mandalorian already, but I wanted to say that I sat down with my father today, and very similar to Dan, he was kind of the one who showed me Star Wars to start with, and then my mom as well. She took me to the prequels when they were in theaters. And my dad's been a little hesitant with Disney Plus. I don't think he quite understands that Star Wars is now in like a TV show format. He always like associates it with the movies, and I don't think he was super pleased with the Rise of Skywalker. He texted me when he saw it. He's like, "Yeah, that was a lot to take in," or some kind of comment like that. Like it was almost too much for him to really appreciate. You know, there's like we all admitted it. I mean, there's a ton going on in that movie, so it's kind of hard to follow. And he sat down with me today, and I was over at his house, and we were hanging out, and I was like, "Hey, let's watch The Mandalorian real quick. They're only 30 minutes. We can just pop on the first episode." And he's like, "Oh, okay." So we threw the first episode in, and he was really loving most of it. He's like, "Oh, that's kind of cool. Oh, that's a callback to that movie or whatever." And then the greatest moment was during the last bit of that episode where IG-11 and the Mando come in and try to take down that little town where Baby Yoda is being held. And you see IG-88 or IG-11 doing the little gun slinging thing where he's like moving like a robot. My dad's grin is ear to ear on his face, and he looks over at me. And then when they're pinned up against the wall, and that guy's got that Gatling gun and he's shooting at him, he looks at me. He's like, "It's like Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid." I'm like, "Yeah, I know, right?" He's like a super Western nerd. He loves all those old John Wayne movies and Clint Eastwood and of course Paul Newman and Robert Redford and Butch Cassidy is me and him. That's our favorite Western ever, and that's like a really cool moment to have shared with him. Now, in the future time of Star Wars, where we have all this new content, I got to introduce. Instead of him introducing me to something, I got to introduce him to The Mandalorian. So I'm hoping that got him hooked, and I would love to be able to finish off the season with him and see what he thinks.
Yeah, it's a great show. It's Charles Westcott's got that comment, truly unifying show. And it really is. I think the child, Baby Yoda, has unified the fandom a little bit more, and we still got a long way to go, I guess. But it's a good start. Dan, what'd you think of it?
I loved it. It was kind of what we were all looking for, I think, that kind of underworld, seedy little bit of back-end Star Wars that you don't normally see on the big screen. And being able to have a TV show like we've seen with Rebels and things is being able to flush out characters over a certain amount of time is really nice. So you kind of get to know the characters and actually see their development through a season. And just the amount of callbacks to the old trilogies and, like you said, introducing it to your dad, right? And I was able to introduce it to my family as well, my mom and my dad. They loved Baby Yoda. Like every time he was on screen, they were laughing so much because there were so many good moments with him, with the teacup, with force choking somebody out of the blue. It's like, what's going on here? Even the part when the scout troopers were like sitting on the ridge there with their scout bikes, and they're just talking. And it's like, "Yeah, man, shut up!" And they just go at Baby Yoda, and they're just like, "Oh man, they're gonna get it. They're gonna get it so well." And then IG-11 pops in, but no, it's a great series. I liked how they had the episodic episodes where each one is kind of in its own. It can kind of be encapsulated in its own thing. But I do like the multiple episode arcs like we have with Rebels and the Clone Wars and stuff like that. So I'm hoping in second season we kind of get that a little bit more with characters that are in multiple episodes. We got that a little bit with Gina Carano and whatnot. But I really enjoyed it, and it was really, really fun to see something live action TV show finally. It was good.
Shannon's got a really good question here. Hold on a second. If we can give Baby Yoda a name, what would it be? Apparently Tika knows, and it may be a girl. She has a point. The not Tika. What's her name?
Taika Waititi, yeah.
Oh yeah. But Gina Carano also kind of hinted at that she knew Baby Yoda's name, and obviously they're shooting season 2, so I'm sure somebody said it, or it's part of the story now. But yeah, it's going to be interesting to find out, what's going on, who the child is, what the client wanted the child for. Although I've got some theories, but yeah, it's Pete Fletcher said a series has not unified the fandom since 1977. It's definitely a great show, and it's a great foray into Star Wars. Although obviously, I wish that the episodes were a little longer because Alex, like we talked about this, we're kind of used to the whole Game of Thrones aspect of a TV series, and 23 minutes, 27 minutes, whatever, how long it is. It's just too short. We want more.
Yeah, we discussed that on my podcast today. We were like, like as much as we love The Mandalorian, I think a general consensus across the board is that the episodes are too short, and we want more from this this story, these characters. And I thought it was funny. One of my co-hosts was like, what shows are 30 minutes long? Sitcoms. This is not a sitcom. This is a Star Wars show. We need 45 minutes plus. Come on, guys, kick it up.
Have you guys seen The Witcher at all?
Yes. Yeah.
Those episodes, I was surprised to see one of them was like over an hour. I was like, wow, that's kind of what we want for Star Wars. But again, it takes a lot of work.
Yeah, Netflix is really trying hard to compete with all the new streaming services. I mean, they were the first. They were the one that kind of started this whole trend, and they're starting to get overtaken with all these other properties that are just doing their own thing. And it used to be like people would pay Netflix to put their properties up on their streaming service. Now they're hoarding all their stuff and they're creating their own streaming service. So Netflix is really trying hard to do these original content and compete with like HBO with Game of Thrones. And there's kind of this power vacuum for fantasy, high fantasy, swordplay and elves and stuff. And I think Netflix really struck the iron while it was hot with Witcher, and Henry Cavill just being the ultimate nerd guy. If you watch interviews with him, he is a fantastic ambassador for this show, and they are really like honing him in on making sure that like the behind the scenes footage of the fight scenes and the lore itself, like he himself is a huge Witcher fan, which comes across in his work and it comes across in fan interviews and stuff like that. It's like it's the perfect storm for Netflix, and I really, really hope that they're super successful with this, and I hope season 2 gets even more money and more production budget on all that stuff.
Definitely.
I definitely think Netflix has been the leader in streaming so far. Obviously, there's a lot of competition heading Netflix's way. I'm still not getting rid of Netflix. There's still just too much on Netflix that I enjoy watching. There's a lot of new things that are popping up. Netflix definitely has the budget to create this new content.
They're in debt, like $17 billion.
Yeah. So
you're not a company without debt.
Yeah. So it's pretty dope, man. It's pretty dope. So getting back to the Rise of Skywalker, we talked a little bit about this a couple of broadcasts ago, but the ending of this Skywalker saga, the ending of the this trilogy. A couple of us have been talking about it. I think Pete Fletzer. I know you. We kind of exchanged some tweets a while ago. A good, and I'll get your takes real fast, a good ending to the 9-film series or a good ending to this trilogy alone, but you can't really see it as an ending to 9 films. Dan, what do you think about that?
Now, I might have a controversial opinion, but walking out of that theater, I don't know, like I didn't have any like vivid or like emotion that I could talk about. When I walked out of, episode 7, I really was excited to come out of that theater and talk about it and really be excited to, talk about it on shows or with friends and stuff and experience the merchandise and everything. But with The Rise of Skywalker, I don't know, the marketing prior to it and the things that happened in the show, like in the movie itself, I felt there were some things that didn't really sit well with fans in general. But for me, some things were kind of shoehorned in a little bit, but there were some awesome parts. A lot of the I'm a sucker for starships and starship battles in space. So like the ending sequence with everybody coming in and just all those Star Destroyers there, that was really fun. Some things with Palpatine I wasn't really sure about. All those Sith acolytes that were kind of in the stands and everything. I felt there was too many people on Exegol. I don't know about you guys, but. That's how kind of I felt about it.
Yeah, I could definitely see that. Like there was like thousands of people in this like arena. Right. You're like, who are you and where did you come from?
Yeah. Exactly. It's like, okay, well, so the one thing that clarified for me in the visual dictionary was that were the ships repurposed or were they somehow summoned by Sith, Sith force powers or whatever, right? Because it wasn't really clear. Like they just came out of the Earth. And the book itself says, yeah, they like retrofitted all these Star Destroyers with all these weapons and things, and just like thinking about like where did all of the technology come for that? Where did all the materials come for all those Star Destroyers to be retrofitted with all these weapons on them? All the people, like where do the people come from? The outer regions, the unknown, like where are they, right?
Yeah.
A lot of questions weren't answered. The Knights of Ren were underused, heavily underused. They were like these big bads that were just kind of gliding around in their starship. But they really didn't have
Jedi.
Sorry?
Not as much as they were underused in The Last Jedi.
That's fair. That's fair. We did get them fighting like Ben at the end, and
Right.
they took out Chewbacca. I was hoping for a fight scene with Chewbacca. Like that would have been really cool. But yeah, there's parts and pieces I liked. The way they handled Carrie, I think they couldn't really have done it any better. Watching through it and knowing that the footage that they used was from like Force Awakens and the shots they used there that they didn't use in the movie prior, you can kind of tell like the lines that she said in the movie was something that it was pretty generic. Like you could use it in a lot of different scenes, and that kind of took me out of it for a minute with Carrie and Leia. But I do appreciate how they handled her character and how they sent her off and how that affected the whole story in general. The very end with the kiss between Kylo Ren and Rey, I thought it was kind of. I felt kind of forced. I don't know. It was interesting. And then at the very, very end, when she's talking to the old lady in the desert, she says, "And who are you? What is your name?" And Ray's like, "Ray." Ray what?
Ray Porkins.
I was hoping she'd say, just Ray. You know, just being who she is and who she's been this whole time, right? But it's interesting that she adopted the name Skywalker. I don't really know what that means going forward for that kind of storyline with her, or like in the comics or whatever it's going to be. But there's a lot of things in there that were really interesting. Like I cannot wait for that show or the movie to come out on Blu-ray where we can pause it and see every starship in that final battle and just pick it apart. I know on the database on the Star Wars website, they just posted some of the aces from the Resistance TV show were in the final battle on Exegol, which is really cool. Small things like that. It's just really fun to see and to kind of make those connections.
Yeah, definitely. Obviously, we've talked about this on the show before. The Rise of Skywalker, although, far from a perfect movie, I think, JJ did the best he could. I think, the movie should have been 4 hours long to be able to have explained a lot of things that he introduced and a lot of things that were introduced in The Force Awakens that weren't followed through with Chapter 8. But, I enjoyed it a lot more than I thought I would. And obviously, I didn't avoid spoilers. I went in looking at everything, and I've even saw like all the stuff that people were leaking from theater screenings, and I was ready to like not like it. To be honest with you, I was ready to be like, all right, I'm done. But like I said, I enjoyed it for what it was. It was a really fun, adventurous movie. There was a lot of things in there that I liked. C-3PO's role was really great. I love seeing him. Another classic character really, come up on his own. Even some of the new characters. I mean, Kerry Russell, although she hardly ever took her mask off, I think she's a great actress and she's a great performer, and I liked what she did. But they should have introduced a little bit of Palpatine's, I don't know, presence in 7 and 8. They just kind of threw it in there.
Yeah, that was interesting the way they brought that in. Did you guys think it was too quick at the beginning, first watch?
Yeah, not even 30 seconds. Not even 30 seconds in the movie, and Palpatine's already talking to what's his name. So it's very, very
Yeah,
I don't know.
This movie was 2 movies in one. Like I think I talked about this on the last stream or the last podcast we did. You can definitely, if you break down the story points and the plot points of Rise of Skywalker, you can see where JJ would have taken his episode 8 if he would have done it. We have the plot thread of Hux being kind of a mole in the First Order. You've got Rey training on this planet with Leia. That whole thing, and Finn, not Finn, I'm sorry, Poe being upset with her for not being part of the fight, instead hanging back. Like all those plot points and all those little character moments felt like they should have been an overarching part of a second half of a movie, or a second half of a trilogy anyway. And then the actual end, episode 9, is pretty much picks up. I'm going to say right after they rescue Chewbacca, or right when they rescue Chewbacca, because if you look at that in comparison to Return of the Jedi, rescuing Chewbacca from the First Order would be the parallel to rescuing Han from Jabba the Hutt, which is what the opening of Return of the Jedi is. So if you want to play with parallels and the whole they're kind of like poetry, it rhymes, like that whole thing with George Lucas. Like if you look at it from that aspect, you can see where JJ would have taken his episode 8 and then where he would have started and taken his episode 9. And I think it would have been fine if he would have had the opportunity to do that. Problem is instead of working with what Rian Johnson had left him, he kind of just went off and did his own thing, and arguably kind of similar to what Rian Johnson did to him in the first place. But that's neither here nor there. That's just it's all in history books, I guess. But my point is, like, there's a lot in there that could have been great. The issue I think I personally come up with is just it's too much too fast, and it's trying to squeeze too much into one movie.
You guys, sorry, just a quick point. Would you guys like it if they did like Rise of Skywalker Part 1, Part 2, like the Harry Potter franchise for the final bit? Would you have preferred like two-hour movies versus what we got, or maybe like 30 minutes longer in this movie? What do you guys think about that?
In the tradition of Star Wars, I think that would be a little off-putting. But honestly, if they would have done that, I'm like, yeah, more Star Wars content. Let's do it. Yeah, go ahead, do what you got to do. But as far as like having like trilogy 1, trilogy 2, trilogy 3, it would have been a little like
it's like
weird.
Yeah, movies, yeah, exactly.
I'm more in the camp of the 3 hour. I would have been okay with a 3-hour film if that's what it took to kind of pace out the story a little bit better.
Yeah,
we know that they can do that, and fans will put up with it. It's just a matter of making sure that it's not 3 hours long because you just put a bunch of filler in. If it could have served the plot, I wouldn't have had an issue with it.
You know what chaps my hide is you can see The Force Awakens, right? You can see The Force Awakens and what that film was trying to do, and JJ and this and that, blah blah blah. Okay, so then you got The Last Jedi, and it's out, it exists, here it is, and then you go back to Rise of Skywalker, written by JJ, and it's bookended. It's this film in the middle that kind of doesn't play well with the other two. And because of that, the last film seems like there's so much crammed into it just to kind of catch up with the overall narrative. I think it would have been a better experience for folks if there was one unifying voice, one unifying force, no pun intended, that to be able to to guide the story. I think jamming all that stuff in the last movie was problematic, and I hope Disney kind of steps back and say, okay, we kind of tried this with this. We tried like different directors, different storytellers, just throw them into the mix. But I'm hoping that they'll learn from that, whether they feel that it worked or didn't. I'm in the camp that I don't think that process worked as well as it could have worked.
Yeah, they tried to do Marvel. They were like Marvel, and Kevin Feige does that. He has different directors for each movie. After 20 some odd movies, we have this big ensemble cast where everybody comes together, and it worked insanely well for them. Unfortunately, I don't think that formula works for Star Wars, and I don't think Kathleen Kennedy has the same type of skill set that Kevin Feige has. And that's not, I don't want to get into a fight about what Kathleen Kennedy can and can't do. She's an iconic producer. She's produced some of the best movies in my lifetime, and some of my favorite all-time best movies of the world have Kathleen Kennedy stamped on them. And, I can't take that away from her, but for whatever reason, she seems to be having a hard time with getting these different writers and directors to kind of work together as a full team. I'm not sure why. Obviously, I'm not in the back rooms at Lucasfilm, but I wish I could be a fly on the wall to hear some of the conversations that are going on over there. But yeah, they tried to do the Marvel thing, and it just didn't work out. So hopefully they're learning from that, and we can move forward with some new movies.
I would argue that the Marvel thing, first and foremost, I don't really think it's the Marvel thing per se. I just think that it is, since the departure of George Lucas after he sold the company, that's just how Disney's used to working, is different directors on different films. But I do agree with the fact that ultimately it's having that unifying force behind the scenes, the Kevin Feige, the George Lucas. I mean, we talk about the fact that in the original trilogy, you had George Lucas, who wasn't directing every film, but he was the person who was laying out the story. How the director wanted to interpret that into the picture they put forward was at the director's kind of will, but they still had to kind of work with George and say, this is why I think it should be this way. And they would have that back and forth, and, you know, George would ultimately approve it. And really, since the departure of George Lucas, they really haven't had that vision, that singular vision that was driving the films, which is why all of a sudden you get, you know, Last Jedi kind of goes off in one direction. It was clear to me that there were certain things that got set up by J.J. Abrams in Force Awakens. But there was, you know, it went a different direction, I think, in some ways, because of the criticism that Force Awakens was maybe a little too derivative of the original Star Wars. And then I feel like the third movie ended up kind of being a reaction to some of the division in the fan base, where they were trying to, because Disney doesn't want the fan base divided. I mean, they spent $4 billion on this property. They want it to be successful. And from what I'm reading and seeing, I mean, none of it's been confirmed yet, but it doesn't even sound like J.J. Abrams is 100% happy with the final cut of the film based on what he handed off to Disney. So how much of that was things getting changed because of what focus groups are coming back with, or there was an inordinate amount of trailers and clips that got put out for this particular film, and I wonder how much of that was just them gauging reaction to that, and then tweaking things at the end to kind of put out the most crowd-friendly version of the film. I thought the kiss was like that. I thought that was a way to appease the Reylo fan base, and all it did was make them feel like it didn't go far enough, while other people kind of felt like it was maybe unnecessary.
You know, one thing about The Rise of Skywalker that I thought very interesting watching it, I've seen it 3 times, and every time I see it, it does seem, Rob, you're right, it does seem like JJ just kind of put in a checklist of things. Like, you don't like Luke Skywalker throwing away the lightsaber? Well, let's have him catch it in this one. You know, so, you know, Rose Tico was too much of a thing. You know, let's scale her back in this one. Check mark. Reylo's kiss, check mark. So everything, it seemed weird. Like, you know, you talk about, you know, making a movie via a, you know, AI, like these other companies are trying to do, or by committee. And that's exactly what it felt like to me. Like a check mark of everything that people were complaining about Star Wars. He just kind of went off this checklist and said, let's do this, let's do that, let's do this, let's do that. And it just that never makes for a good movie.
And my question is, how much of that was JJ and how much of that was being driven by the powers that be at Disney? I mean, there's you had forwarded me the link to the you know, the Reddit post where they were talking about kind of some of the things that happened behind the scenes that maybe got JJ in there to do this film in the first place. That was despite the fact that the Lucasfilm Story Group and Kathleen Kennedy may have preferred he not been there. Again, I don't have any of that stuff, you know, verified at this point. But when you kind of look at the film that came out, and again, I totally agree with you. I thought it was a hugely entertaining film. There was a lot of stuff that did work in it. It was definitely rushed in points. It did feel like it was 2 movies crammed into one. But there's certainly an argument for the fact that they were hitting on certain points to hopefully try to minimize the division that occurred in The Last Jedi. And you're right. I mean, films by committee are not going to be successful. You're going to end up with a bunch of people that got some of what they want, but not enough to really make them happy.
I think definitely a big point that we're kind of talking about right now is kind of taking people's opinions of the franchise and what they want for it and putting it into the movie. And maybe that did happen, maybe it didn't happen, but I feel like if the Lucasfilm Story Group, there's a lot of great people on that committee, and they really do a great job at trying to keep the continuity, a single continuity in the Star Wars universe. And that's really the big thing that I love about Star Wars, is the continuity of all the different stories. And just seeing that what was done in this movie might have been to, you know, appease some fans, or maybe not, maybe the opposite, to shock people. I think that if you're making a movie for the Star Wars fans and you're making a movie for the Star Wars franchise, if you think back, when the first movie came out, Episode 4, there was like nobody had an opinion on it because it was a brand new thing, right? And everybody loved it, and there was some really interesting stuff that was going on. And just I think if they're going to create a story that they want to tell, they should do that in a way that sticks to the story that they want to tell, but not like whatever the community is saying, great, but also stick to what you want to do as your story. And that's the thing with the 3 movies, right? After Episode 7 was done, Episode 8 was coming out, and people were like, oh, it's a new director, and apparently they didn't really have an idea of what they wanted to do from Episode 7 to Episode 8, and then Episode 8 to Episode 9. And not having that continuity between those 3 movies is really tough when you don't have a single vision, right? Or even just like the story group. I don't know what much they were involved there with those 3 films, but I feel like if they were the Episode 8 conflict with Episode 7 and 9, I don't think that would have been there. And don't get me wrong, there's things in the Episode 8 that I really loved, notably the one moment where everything just goes dead silent and you have the Star Destroyers just get decimated by the hyperspace jump attack, and the throne room scene where they're killing all the different Praetorian guards and everything. Great scenes, fantastic cinematography, and it's just you want to make sure that you're doing it for the overall story, and then the fandom and people can react to that and enjoy or hate what's on the screen, right?
Yeah,
yeah, but and that's what if you stick to that primordial concept of filmmaking, I mean, that's what Rian Johnson did. He said, "I'm going to do the story that I want to do, and this is what I want to do. I'm not going to listen to everybody."
I was just going to say that, Ro.
And there's a mistake there, I feel. He obviously there's all this rhetoric about him saying, "I don't care about the fans." I mean, I guess he was saying that during some sort of panel, and Mark Hamill was there, and Mark Hamill's like, "No, what about the fans?" And he's like, "No, I don't care about the fans." I mean, it's I think from an independent filmmaker standpoint, that's fine to do because you're there to voice your story and to be able to produce that story the way you want it, because it is an independent film by definition. But when you come into a franchise like that, you have to take into consideration the fans, the base that put your film there. Because if you're not doing it for the fans, then who the hell are you doing it for? Then it's not going to work. You do have to be true to the story, but you have to go back as a director, as a creative, and say, okay, I want to tell this story, but I want to keep it within the context of the overall picture. And I think that is why The Last Jedi kind of falls flat, because it didn't do that. And now we see when these 3 films are out, you see that the first, Chapter 7 and Episode 9 are like bookends in this one middle episode that sticks out like a sore thumb.
So to your point, Ro, you're 100% spot on with the Rian Johnson thing. We all criticize Rian Johnson for doing that very thing. I'm going to make the story that I want to make. I'm not necessarily going to worry about what the fans want, as opposed to J.J. Abrams in The Rise of Skywalker, where, like you said, he had this checkbox like, okay, the fans want this, check. The fans want that, check. Both of those things can be a negative if they're not done properly. So the thing that I would mention, if we're going to move into Colin Trevorrow's script, if you'll notice, like, he kind of played both of those fields where he took what Rian Johnson did, even if we didn't like it, Luke's death and a couple other story elements that were carried through with Kylo Ren kind of being irredeemable. Like he wasn't the good guy in Duel of the Fates. He ended up being the ultimate bad guy, which I actually preferred. Those story elements that some people didn't like in The Last Jedi were still carried through. However, you can tell that Colin Trevorrow knew what the fans wanted as far as the story goes, where they wanted their characters treated with respect. You see Luke Skywalker having a much bigger presence in Duel of the Fates with Kylo Ren and Rey training her and all that stuff as a Force ghost. And these and Finn and even Rose Tico. Like we said, Rose Tico was non-existent in The Rise of Skywalker because I guess JJ thought that nobody liked her, so let's just kick her to the curb. Whereas in Colin's script, she's a main part of it, and we don't know how it ultimately would have played out on screen, but she was still there, and she was still part of the resistance. She still had a part to play. So, there's two different ways to go about this, and I think Ryan Johnson is the extreme end of I don't care what the fans think, and I'll do what I want just to tell a story. And then there's the other extreme where JJ is like, well, let's just give the fans everything they want regardless of the story, which is why we got Palpatine back for no real existent reason, and several other elements that we've already talked about in that movie that kind of don't make any sense, but they're just there to kind of fan service. So
that's a good question.
Yeah, go ahead. What was that?
As you say, there's a new question. Who's Palpatine's wife or the lady he had the child with? Like, who is this?
Yeah.
Well,
I heard, I was talking to my crew. I heard that there was a comic book recently within the Disney era that came out a few months before The Rise of Skywalker, where it was very plainly and clearly said that he didn't have an heir and he never married or anything like that. And then in the movie, they're just like, whatever, screw that comic.
I do want to say something. I want to push back a little bit, Alex, with what you said. And obviously we're never going to know for sure, but I cannot see J.J. Abrams sitting back and saying, you know what? People burned Rose Tico action figures on YouTube, so I'm not going to put her in it as much. I can't see that. I mean, he's the one that hired her in the to begin with. I don't know what happened there, but I find it hard to believe JJ basically said, I'm not going to include her because the fans didn't like her, or the vocal minority didn't like her. So
it was Ryan Johnson that hired her, I believe, not JJ.
Oh yeah, that's right. So right, yeah.
Did you guys read the Rise of Resistance? Is it Rise of Resistance or Resistance Reborn? Did you read that at all?
Yeah.
There's a scene in that where Rose and Finn are talking, and I don't remember the exact. It might have not been Rose, but somebody's talking to Finn, and they discuss the part on Crate where they kissed, and they're just, oh no, like that was just like a heat in the moment thing. Like there's nothing between us. So they kind of cut the, they're in a relationship, or they've fallen for each other kind of thing. It's more like it was in the heat of war, and that's just kind of what happened. So it's interesting. Like I'm glad I read that before going into the movie, because then you kind of understand that Rose is not as prevalent in the main trio's kind of circle, right?
Rose is the third wheel. I feel so bad for her now.
She could have been great. I mean, she could. We look at Paige Tico, which honestly is probably my favorite character from the Last Jedi. Paige Tico had about maybe 5 minutes of screen time, and she made an impact on me. I thought her character was awesome. I'm like, those definitely had potential, and I think reading some of what Trevorrow did in his script with having her go to Coruscant to be part of the resistance to try and take over the capital city, like it really could have worked out really well. I am sad that they didn't take that character further, although I understand like she was kind of shoehorned into The Last Jedi and her story didn't really go anywhere. So it was kind of an awkward character that I don't think JJ, with everything else that was piled onto his plate and what he had to wrap up, I don't really think he knew what to do with her.
Just
go ahead, Rob.
Interlude there. Ryan Johnson is on record as having said that he specifically chose her because she seemed like the last person that you would see in a Star Wars film.
So, he's subverting our expectations again.
Well, so that's what I was going to get at, is that a big part of what, and I think in some ways Last Jedi was in reaction to the fact that so many fans said that Force Awakens was in a lot of ways derivative of the original Star Wars film. So he kind of took it to the other extreme. He didn't want it to be like The Empire Strikes Back. And there's a question about whether he was successful in that, because it's really just a lot of the same plot points shifted around. But the other big part of what was done was to subvert fan expectations at every turn within The Last Jedi, which in and of itself is not, to me, a means of making a film. It's just trying to avoid being predictable, I guess.
I think it's a really hard thing as a storyteller. Like I read a whole bunch of different series for manga and stuff, and in that kind of fandom, you have a whole bunch of different stories that are going on in different series. But there is so many fans out there that really obsess about what's happening in the background of these panels in the comic and what's happening in the story and where is this going. And the series that I read, the author does a really good job at creating his story and making it really hard for the readers or viewers to guess what's going to happen. There's a lot of theories out there, and sometimes they're right and sometimes they're wrong. But being able to subvert expectations, right, in a good way, like they did in like Endgame and Infinity War and stuff, right? Seeing that those kind of really awesome story elements are really hard to do in this day and age because everything's on the internet. Everyone's talking on forums of some sort or on podcasts like us or on YouTube channels. There's so many thoughts and ideas flying around the internet now that it's so hard for somebody that's working on a series by themselves or with a group on a committee or whatever it is to come up with a story that's fresh, new, and doesn't upset somebody or doesn't go to what they thought might happen and kind of makes them mad or angry or upset or super happy about like the kiss they had at the end of the movie or whatever it is. It's really hard to create a story that everyone can fall in line with and really kind of grasp. But when you like Rogue One, you do a really good job and it works and everyone loves it. It's just a matter of finding that recipe.
And part of that recipe was what? Part of that recipe was staying true to the overall, I guess, narrative, the overall story of, we know what happens at the end of Rogue One. They escape with the plans. So how do we get there? I think I've always called Rogue One the love letter to Star Wars fans, and I've always called The Last Jedi the breakup letter to Star Wars fans.
It's Dan, some of your comments made me think of something that George R. R. Martin talked about when writing Game of Thrones books. And like you said, everything's on the internet. There's like complete dedicated fans, kind of like us with Star Wars for his stories and such like that, where he's like, yeah, sometimes I'll be writing my book and I'll just happen upon something online where a fan basically guesses every single plot point of my book moving forward. And he said, he's like, just because they do that doesn't necessarily mean that you as an author have to change it to subvert their expectations. If it makes sense and if it is true to the characters, then do it. I mean, all you're going to do is legitimize the intelligence of the fans that you're making this content for. So I don't necessarily see a problem with somebody guessed it on Reddit and they guessed what the plot lines are going to be, so I have to try and change it so it's different. Like no, you don't have to. I mean, there's things that you can do. I mean, Martin is famous for just offing characters that everybody thinks is like the main character of the show or the book or whatever, and he just kills them off and everybody stuns. Like, there's still moments that you get like that, but as far as like a regular plot point, I think George Lucas said that there are only 32 stories able to be written. Everything's pretty much a variation of 32 different stories. So yeah, I mean, after this much time, people are going to start understanding and guessing, and especially with the internet now where we have knowledge of the entire human history of writing. Like, yeah, we're probably going to guess what you're going to do, but that doesn't necessarily mean that it's a bad thing.
Well,
no, exactly.
So many fans out there analyzing this stuff with so much knowledge of the source content that you're going to have people guessing what the plot points are going to be. Especially with Star Wars. I mean, it's been around for 42 plus years. People know it inside out, forward, backward, which is why when you do things that kind of break the mechanics of how that universe works, it sits badly with people. You look at the Holdo maneuver. That was, a perfect example. It's like, well, if this is possible, then what's the point of building a Death Star? What's the point of building anything, really? I mean, just one unmanned ship could potentially take it all out. And it went against years of established canon, even considering that we threw away the entire expanded universe. But
it looks cool, though, Rob.
It did.
It looked amazing.
Well, and that's the thing, right? It was an artistic. If everyone talks about how artistically beautiful the Last Jedi was, but again, to Rose's earlier point, if it's not in service to the greater story, George Lucas was not doing things specifically in the original trilogy just to make it look pretty. He was telling a story, and when it doesn't connect back to that story and it's not true to that story, that's when I think you get off the rails. You're never going to make everyone happy, but like you said, it's at this point there's so much Star Wars out there, especially tied to the Skywalker saga, that it's hard to do something truly original.
Yeah, It is. It's a very very interesting time to be alive as a Star Wars fan. I just put this up here. Star Wars is over. You got Mandalorian is done. The trilogy is done. Season 7 of Clone Wars will come about, but then that'll be done too. We got new Star Wars coming, but it is a very interesting time. We're kind of like, when you get let go of a job and you're trying to find something, we're in between Star Wars right now, and it's a very fascinating time. What do you guys? Let's push forward with our conversation here regarding the future of the brand. What do you guys feel is going to happen with these new? Somebody had mentioned too that by the end of February, or by the end of this month, which is pretty soon, we're supposed to be getting some new announcement about either a new director, a new trilogy, or a new film. What do you guys? What have you heard about that?
I haven't heard anything about the new film yet, but I've heard about the new Project Luminous stuff for. I think it's coming out in February 20-something or other. They're talking about releasing more information on that, and it seems like it might be possibly the Old Republic kind of theme stuff. That's something that I'm really excited for. But yeah, I haven't heard anything about the new movie stuff yet, but I've just been busy. So you guys know anything about that?
No, talk a little bit about Project Luminous, because that's one of the things that I've kind of stayed out of the loop. I know there's different authors involved.
I'm just gonna pull the authors here to see what we got.
Yeah.
We have some really awesome people involved in this, including I believe Charles Soule's involved in this. And he's
Charles Soule,
one of my favorite writers of all time for Star Wars. We got Claudia Gray, Justina Ireland, Daniel Jose Older, Cavan Scott, and Charles Soule.
right?
All of which have written in some way for Star Wars, and they're doing it not only through novels, but they're also doing it through comics and also I believe short stories. And it's very interesting. The only kind of really piece of information we got from it so far is the quote they gave us, and it says, "The Force is what gives us a Jedi his power. It's the energy field created by all living things until Project Luminous." And so it's 2020, and we're going to get more information on that. I really hope they dive into the Old Republic. That is beloved by fans, all types of fans. The only thing that you want to make sure there is that you're being true to the story of what's come before in EU with Revan and everything. But I mean, with the authors that are there and the people that are involved with that, I don't have a doubt in my mind that they're not going to do a good job, because they just like Charles Soule especially. I don't know if you've read any of his work for the new Marvel content.
Yeah,
he knows the characters better than anybody I've seen write comics or books. Darth Vader especially, he did a series for that. He's working on a new series right now for the Knights of Ren with the Rise of Kylo Ren, and oh my God, he knows his stuff inside and out, and it is a new perspective that I think fans are looking for in Star Wars. And it's sad that it's done in a comic format, because that only hits a certain percentage of fans. Whereas if you had it in a TV series or in a movie of some sort, or like a movie on even Disney Plus, if they were to do that, I don't know. I feel like it would hit a lot more of the fan base, and maybe even some new people and bring them in. But Project Luminous sounds like a really interesting idea.
As a podcaster, I love that they're doing all the different media, though, because
there
are so many fans who won't be able to follow it and keep up with it, and it ensures that we're going to be useful to the casual fan for a long time, just in terms of keeping them up to date on what's going on in the comics and in the books and how that ties into the films. And again, that's where you kind of get you peel away the layers of the onion and you get all that additional deeper content when you watch those films.
Yeah, definitely. Rob, are you sleep podcasting? My eyes are up here.
No, I'm looking down. Look at the Falcon.
Your eyes can deceive you. Don't trust them.
Nice.
It's gotta move the camera down.
Yeah. So what do you guys? They're trying to tap. There you go, Rob. They're trying to tap new directors, new voices for Star Wars, obviously. And then getting back to this rumor that everybody is just jumping on, George Lucas wants creative control of Lucasfilm again. Disney plans on bringing George Lucas back. as much of a pipe dream as that would be, fantastic. I just don't think that's going to happen.
He's done, man. He's so done with what he created in his mind and what his world is of the Star Wars universe. I think he respects the split that he did with Disney. He has his own thoughts on what he would want to have done, and we know for a fact that episode 7, 8, and 9 would have been different with him. But just I think it's a lot of fans just wanting to criticize the new and Lucasfilm kind of merger and what they've created content wise. But if you look at the whole spectrum and not just the movies, you look at the movies, the comics, the TV shows, the books. I think they've done a really good job overall in all of those medias to bring Star Wars back and give it a new life. They've explored many different stories, brand new characters like Dr. Aphra in the comic books. They've explored new planets in Rogue One and even in Rise of Skywalker and Episode 8 and even Episode 7. Things that we never really saw that were going to come. But just, I think if you look at just the movies, yes, there can be a lot of things said about that. But if you look at Rebels, especially Rebels, that has opened up so many things in the fandom. You have the world between worlds. You have just the after Order 66 Jedi purge, and you have Kanan training Ezra. You have the Mandalorians in there and kind of creating that culture up a bit more. Building up of the Rebel Alliance and the different cells that are in there and kind of exploring that. It's that kind of world building in Rebels and the Mandalorian and that kind of stuff that really brings me in as a fan and makes me want to know more about the universe and absorb more content through the comics or absorb more content through the books. But I think overall, as a business and as what people think of Disney and Lucasfilm merging together, I think Lucas is done. George Lucas, he's not going to come back as much as we would love him to. But overall, I think they're doing an okay job. They're not murdering the series, as some people put it.
I don't see George coming back. Just maybe coming back on set with Jon Favreau and Dave Filoni, his prodigy, for a couple episodes of Mandalorian, and maybe if one day they do a feature film, he might be there to kind of give moral support and some story ideas and stuff like that. But him coming back to like direct a movie with full control and it's all him, and he's in the driver's seat. Like I definitely don't see that coming. And in my opinion, I think the future of Star Wars, if we want to talk about what's to come next, I want them to get as far away from the original trilogy storyline and timeline as possible. Like I don't want to. I mean, just Cassian Andor, I can see as long as they keep it separated from the events that we know that the main three, Luke, Han, and Leia, are involved in. If they put him off on some separate little hidden mission somewhere, that's fine. I'm just specifically talking about like our main characters and events that we already know and we've seen in other movies. Like just don't go there and try and like retell it from a different perspective. Just move away from this idea, go far into the future, whatever that might look like, or go into the past, which I think they're hinted at doing. Something about 400 years in the High Republic, I think they're talking about. Not the Old Republic, but the High Republic, which I'm not entirely sure what the difference is. I'm down for that as long as there should be this bubble around the original trilogy and the prequel trilogy events. I think I mentioned it to you, Ro. It's getting to the point where it's kind of irritating for me to see all these new characters popping up during Luke's era, right? When he's of age and it's the New Hope and he's the last remaining hope of the galaxy to defeat Darth Vader and Palpatine. But we have Ahsoka and we have this guy Cal and we have Kanan and we have Ezra floating around out there somewhere. Like they just keep tacking on all these other Jedi who, in my opinion,
should have been dead.
Yeah, should have been dead or not been there at all. Like if you're telling me that like all these like free roaming Jedi are running around, that just means that Palpatine and Vader never really accomplished anything. You know what I mean? Like they defeated the hierarchy and the establishment, but the Jedi were always there. They were always going to figure out a way to defeat them. Like I like having Luke being like literally Luke and Leia are the last hope of this galaxy. And the more they tack on these extra characters, the less I feel like Han and Luke are important to the overall story. So I'm like, like, please stop doing that, Lucasfilm. Can we just move away and go somewhere new? We don't need to see AT-AT walkers, and we don't need to go back to Coruscant or anything like that. Like, let's explore. It's a big galaxy. Let's explore something new. And it's one of the reasons why I like The Mandalorian, where it's very separate. It takes place after Return of the Jedi, where there's this big 30-year gap where we don't really know what happens, and things can happen in that time period that don't really affect the overall story of the main saga. So I'm all right with that. But I'm like, go to the future, go far, far into the future and have some new Sith Lord and have Luke and the Skywalkers be like this crazy myth that we all kind of know about in legends, and we hear the stories, but we don't really know the truth. Like, go that way. That's my opinion. That's what I want to see. I think that'd be the smart way if we want to. If Lucasfilm wants to create new stories without stepping on the toes of the legacy characters that we all know and love.
Is your head going to explode when they show baby Luke Skywalker in the Obi-Wan Kenobi series?
If they do it wrong, yeah. I have already written what the Kenobi series should be, in my opinion. I'm like, I already know what I would want to explore with Kenobi. I want to watch him deal with the aftermath of losing his apprentice and losing the galaxy overall and all his friends and the established Jedi Order that he fought and died for, or metaphorically died for, be gone and be lost. Like, that's a huge mental strain for somebody like Obi-Wan Kenobi, who is like one of the most diehard by the book Jedi that we know. Like, his master, Qui-Gon Jinn, was like, screw the book, lad, let's go do what the Force wants us to do. But Kenobi was like, no, man, we got to follow the rules. So I want to see that man deal with the aftermath of Revenge of the Sith and kind of coming to terms with, like, you're not a general anymore. You're in hiding. And if you do something that, like, you would normally do, like, he would always want to go to the rescue of somebody who's in harm's way and do the right thing and kind of put himself in the situation where he has to be the Jedi Knight. But if he has to do that, then he's putting Luke Skywalker at risk, exposing him and exposing Luke. So he has to kind of like take his character and bury it. Like, there's like a whole psyche thing going on with Kenobi that I want to see. And I hope that they dive into that instead of like, oh, let's just have Kenobi go off on adventures and swashbuckle with his lightsaber. Like, no, you can't do that because that will like be lighting a flare for the Empire to come and take him and Luke away. It's like, it has to be subtle. It has to be all about his psyche and learning, diving deep into the Force and talking with Qui-Gon. If they could get Liam Neeson to come back and be a Force ghost, man, I'd be on cloud 9.
I would be too. I love Liam Neeson as Qui-Gon. And like Clone Wars, when his voice came up, you're like, oh my god.
Was he in the Rise of Skywalker? I feel like he was.
Yeah.
Yes. Okay.
Like,
yes.
Do it. Bring him back. Force ghost.
Yeah, Alex, you're talking about how Obi-Wan should not be swashbuckling and waving his lightsaber around. What I would love for them to explore and maybe explain is maybe he waited for a specific time to do that, because obviously we see it in New Hope. He's in this cantina, and all of a sudden he gets his lightsaber out and he cuts this guy's arm off.
Well, again, at that point, Luke's family had died. He knew he was going to take him off of Tatooine. Like, it's a different scenario than having him in hiding and having to keep a low key. So, like, my idea for it is, like, you've got the Hutt cartel, you've got the scum and villainy of Tatooine, you've got slavery, you've got all kinds of crazy things that could happen to the Lars homestead and Luke and Owen and Beru, that Obi-Wan would be obligated in protection of Luke to try and diffuse. Obviously, I want to see lightsabers and I want to see Obi-Wan be awesome, but I would rather him go about it a little bit more stealthily and do kind of like diffuse the situation with the Hutts by doing a deal with them. Like, hey, if you leave the Lars family alone, I'll go and do this job for you. Kind of like we see him in in the Clone Wars, what was that story arc where he took on like some face of a bounty hunter and went and did a job and turned into a bad guy for a while. Like, if you want to play around with that kind of aspect, I don't want to see him going off and being a Jedi Knight and being Obi-Wan Kenobi from the prequel era. Like, that's not the character that we need to see in this time frame. That's just my opinion. Feel free to argue with me or disagree. It's fine.
I think you will see some of that, though. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Dan.
No, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, I think you will see some of that in the sense that I could see Obi-Wan having to go elsewhere in the galaxy and kind of light the torch there to draw off heat if they felt like things were getting too close to Tatooine, where Luke might start being in danger. So I could see them inserting more of the action stuff if Obi-Wan were to go kind of elsewhere in the galaxy, make a big scene, and then kind of flee. So all the attention went elsewhere. But I agree. I think there's definitely going to be an aspect of it that is him in seclusion on Tatooine, kind of dealing with local issues, communing with Qui-Gon. And just one other thing to go back to your earlier point about the other Jedi that were kind of scattered around during the Luke timeline. That stuff never bothered me that much, primarily because with tens of thousands of Jedi being present in the galaxy at the time that Order 66 was implemented, you would expect that some people were going to avoid that through sheer luck or whatever the case may be and kind of be on the run. But Luke was really the only one that had the power to address the issue at hand because he had that personal relationship with Vader, which was the only way that Vader was ever going to be reached. It was never going to be through sheer power in the Force. So that was my perspective on that. I do get what you're saying. I mean, for Yoda to sit there and say that, Luke and Leia were the only hope in the galaxy, clearly he wasn't thinking anyone else was out there. But I definitely think that in terms of the people that had a chance to have an impact on that situation, only Luke and Leia would have that connection to Vader.
I think based on Rebels, real fast, based on Rebels, I think at that point Yoda knew that Ezra was still out there.
Yeah, because he kind of talks to Ezra through the Force, and at the end of the series, you have Ahsoka looking for Ezra, right? So the one thing I would say is that I don't know if Ahsoka, since she was not a Jedi and she wasn't a dark side user or anything, she was kind of in the middle in that gray area. Maybe that couldn't really feel her in the Force or communicate with her in the Force in the way that he did with Ezra or Kanan in those ways. But I feel like, yeah, he definitely knew Ezra was there. And just to kind of go through all those different things, like we have Cal Kestis even, right? In the Star Wars universe. And I feel like, I don't know if you guys have played through the Fallen Order game, but it was very, very, very reminiscent of like a Kanan storyline. And to me, I enjoyed the game, but I didn't really fall in love with the story. And it was interesting to see where he went and what things he was doing, but you can kind of tell the beats coming through the game where it's going to end up. And it was interesting to see that, like, at the end, all of these Jedi are still alive, and what is their role now in the universe, right? We don't know if Cal continues forward. We don't know what happens to Ahsoka after Episode 6, or even Ezra. He's in the unknown regions or wherever he is, and it's interesting to see like where those specific Jedi or Force users are going to be. Excited to see what kind of happens with them.
I want to see space whales.
I love Let's go.
Space whales are a staple of science fiction and science
fantasy.
Right? They're everywhere. They're in Star Trek. They're in Star Wars. Like, everybody loves space whales. Oh, and Ro, I've been watching Lost in Space. There was a space whale in Lost in Space too.
Yeah,
I was like, hey, look at that thing.
It's a space whale.
Yeah, put a space underneath the logo of your podcast and just have it flying through.
The new logo for the Scarif podcast is a space whale.
They're referenced as far back as the making Return of the Jedi, which I'm working my way through right now, by Jonathan Rensler. It is crazy when you read the making of the original trilogy books. So many of the ideas that didn't make it into the original trilogy films that they have since pulled in.
Sure,
it's just mind blowing how much of that stuff is cropped up.
Zeb was supposed to be Chewbacca, and then they made a new species and a race, and that's who he is. It's pretty cool how they repurpose a lot of that. Like, even the one thing that I loved before I went into the movie for The Rise of Skywalker, going back to that just for a quick second, was the throne, the Sith throne.
Yep.
I fell in love with that as soon as I saw that, and like the juxtaposition between the one from the trailer and the one from the art.
The drawings, yeah.
Yeah. Oh my God, I love that. It just looks so like demonic, and it just fit the Sith kind of lore very well. So it was good.
Yeah, it's a lot of great iconography. I'll say that 10 times. A lot of great images. I love. We got off track, I think, a little bit about an hour and 12 minutes ago. Alex, you were talking about the leaked images, the concept art that Colin Trevorrow was attached to. Let's go over that a little bit. Let's go over some of those points for the supposed leaked script for Duel of the Fates. Rob, did you see? I know I sent you some of the pictures, but did you see most of them?
I did, yeah.
What did you guys think of the overall impact of those images? I mean, from C-3PO, kind of cradling R2-D2, he's all damaged. There's one shot in there that was very impactful. The droids are walking through Coruscant, and Coruscant is all kind of damaged. I mean, this movie seems like it would have been a downer from the get-go. Dan, did you see some of those images?
Yeah, I didn't see them until just a second ago. I just looked them up on the internet. I'm looking through these, and they're very impactful. Like, God, they are.
Yeah, they're strong.
Like the Rey in the Star Destroyer around all those stormtroopers with that blue dual saber. It's just, oh my God, it's beautiful. And the Kylo versus Vader, it looks like in that one.
Yeah.
It has a lot of emotion behind it. And that's the one thing that I missed from this movie, was the fact that I came out of it and I didn't feel like super sad or super nostalgic or super whatever it was. Like I just came out and I felt okay. I was like, okay, that kind of ended it. Sure, I'm happy. And that was
it seemed like, I left the theater like, oh, that was a decent science fiction fantasy type movie.
You're not really
yeah.
I don't know.
But what? I'm sorry, Rob. Go ahead.
How many times have you guys watched it?
Twice.
Yeah, I've gone 3 times, and every time I felt better coming out of it. I don't know. And it's interesting. I mean, I've got to experience it again the first time with other people in the theater who had not seen it previously. Couples that, had come, kind of waited until later in the game, and they were reacting to everything. And you could tell it was their first time seeing it. And I don't know how much of that is just letting go of expectations, I guess. And accepting the fact that this is the movie we got. This is going to be the end of the 9-film arc. I totally agree. It was a better ending to the trilogy than it was to the 9-film arc. But there were definitely parts in there that I felt emotion towards. I didn't come out, crushed or elated or anything like that. But definitely every time I saw it, I was more satisfied, I guess is the best word.
I wanted. I'm sorry. Go ahead, Dan.
I'd say as you see a movie more and more, you're not really looking at the foreground. You're looking more in the background and on the middle ground, and you're seeing things that you don't pick up the first time.
Yep.
And you know what's coming up. You're not really listening to exactly what they're saying, but you're watching their actions, watching the people around them moving around or the props around them, and you kind of see more things as you watch it more. And I watched it a second time by myself, and just sitting there and knowing what was going to happen. I felt a little bit more. I felt better about the opening. The opening of the movie was very quick the first time. I was like, oh, they introduced Palpatine already. They're doing this. They're light speed jumping. What the heck is that? And all this other stuff. They're jumping through these things, and it's just like smash cut, smash cut, smash cut.
Yeah.
And then you get into the second viewing, and I'm like, oh, okay. Like I now that I know that's coming, I'm not as shocked by that.
Right.
The one thing that got me was when Chewbacca was captured, and then the force lightning happens and the ship explodes. I almost stood up out of my chair because I was like, oh my God, they can't kill Chewie this way. Like this, if they do that, it would have blown my mind, and I don't know. I don't know if I would have watched the next movie. I was at that point. I was like,
imagine if that was the end of like episode 8. Like that was the cliffhanger. Oh my god!
Done it.
And then we find out in episode 9, like they find out, like, oh my god, Chewie's still alive. We have to rescue him. Like that would have been such a cool moment.
And like thinking in the meta kind of commentary there too, like Peter Mayhew passed away recently, right?
Yeah.
And is it Eunice? Eunice, who picked up the role, was able to mentor Peter and everything he's done for the character. I feel like there hasn't been a jolt in Chewbacca's character in the movies. Yeah. And he's really much pulled off a lot of great moments with Chewbacca.
Yeah.
Hey! And I feel like that moment really got me the first time around. And then when they pulled him back in, I felt this like sigh of relief. That was the one thing in the movie that really got me. Apart from that, though, like I said, at the end, you're just like, okay, it's not bad. Moving on.
Yeah, I knew they weren't going to kill Chewbacca. There's no way. I would have walked out of the theater and set that building on fire. There's no way. There's no way.
It's like killing the family dog, man.
When I say walking, I on my podcast, on the Voice of the Force podcast, there's Noma, Ed, and I am known as like the most optimistic person on the podcast. And for me to walk out of a theater on something like that, it would really have to have impacted me to the point where it's just like I don't know why they would do that, you know? Like in the EU, I don't know if you guys have read any of that stuff, but with Chewbacca, he was crushed by a moon. That's how he died. Right. And I'm like, there's no way you're going to force lightning a ship and he explodes and it's exploding. Like, that doesn't make sense.
But Alex is right. If that was the end of episode 8, that would have been, again, the discussion about his Chewie life plus the force lightning coming out of Rey's hand would have set the world aflame in terms of the whole Palpatine link.
Could you imagine?
It would have been a crazy couple of years.
So, Alex, I know you are a big Colin Trevorrow fan because of, hashtag fucking dinosaurs, but I'm done.
I get it.
But so let me ask you this: you, as a fan of Colin, seeing all this stuff, and I don't know if you read any of the leaked stuff from Reddit and the stuff, the material that was there. What, in your opinion, as a fan, how would you have, or what would you have expected from a Colin T Star Wars film? And I know, this might have been, the Reddit stuff might have been like a first draft or an early concept, but there's a lot there to kind of sink your teeth in. How would you have expected that to roll out?
Yeah, just a disclaimer. We all understand that this is just a concept art and probably a first, maybe second draft of a script. So the end product could have been vastly different. I mean, there was concept art for the Death Star from The Force Awakens, and we obviously we didn't get that in that movie. We got it in the third movie. So concept art doesn't necessarily mean it'll make it to the final product, and the same goes for a script. You guys are jerks in this. In the comments below, man, you guys are harsh. Okay, so to kind of give the people who are listening like a little bit of a backstory to this, I'm an enormous Jurassic Park fan. Since the beginning. It was the first movie that I ever saw in theaters, and I've been hooked ever since. And even though some of the movies are less than perfect, I still love them because #FuckYeahDinosaurs.
Who doesn't want
and the franchise was dead. I mean, it was essentially gone. We didn't have any books. We didn't have maybe a couple comics here and there, a video game from like the 90s. Really nothing to go off of as a fan. We were just kind of nostalgic for the old movies. And Colin Trevorrow comes in and does Jurassic World. And it's a soft reboot, not a reboot, but a soft rehash, kind of like The Force Awakens was for New Hope, but a little bit different because it kind of worked off of what was there from the first couple of movies. And, the biggest thing for me is that Colin, he respects the lore that has come before. He treats the source material with respect. And he has the heart of the material in his movies. People can criticize the movies all they want. Jurassic World wasn't perfect. Fallen Kingdom wasn't perfect. But the movies held the heart of the Jurassic Park franchise, of like this misuse of genetic material and human beings playing God essentially, and the repercussions of that. So
Plus,
all those elements,
the
all those
dinosaurs had dual-bladed lightsabers.
all those elements are there. I'm going to get to that. Yeah. So the thing with let me transition to Star Wars now. If Colin had Star Wars, it was very clear that despite people not really liking The Last Jedi, or at least not in this group anyway, we had our opinions on it. Colin took those elements and he moved forward with it, and he went with it. Like Kylo Ren being the ultimate bad guy. Like, I actually really liked that idea. And I like that he killed Snoke in The Last Jedi. That was actually one of the moments that I actually really enjoyed, because it's kind of like, yeah, that's what a Sith or that's what a dark side user would do. Like, if you don't need your master anymore, just off him. Like, that's a staple of Star Wars. And seeing him going forward and learning more, going to Mortis, like, these are deep cuts in Star Wars lore that JJ, I'm sure, is aware of, but he just didn't feel like maybe that was good enough for the general audience, I guess, is the only really excuse I can think of. But Colin went there. We're going to Mortis. We're going deep into Star Wars dark side lore with these holocrons and these really cool elements that Kylo Ren is going to be the ultimate bad guy. And again, Rey, like, the most obvious character development for her would have to transition her having that staff that she's fought with for 19 years on Jakku turn into a dual-bladed lightsaber in the last movie that she created from the cracked crystal of Anakin Skywalker's lightsaber. Like, yeah, of course. Why wouldn't you do that? Like, these are the types of things that I'm like, Colin understands what fan service is and how to use it properly, I feel like, because he does that with the Jurassic Park movies. Like, there's a lot of fan service in there, but he does it properly, in my opinion. And it's not overly blown. It's not checking boxes. It's just kind of like naturally there as part of the backdrop of the story. And I feel like he did that. And then, of course, the story plot lines with going to Coruscant, which is the heart of the Republic. We didn't see Coruscant at all in this sequel trilogy. Like, nothing. Not even a mention. Like, I don't even know if anybody talked about it.
It was just Hosnian Prime, really. That's where the
just Hosnian Prime, which
was
is like the New Republic or something. But once that was gone, you would think that they would kind of revert back to Coruscant, which was the heart of the old Republic. And to have them there with that looming ship, like, kind of like overshadowing the city, like, these are all really cool elements of the story, and they look cool on concept art. But really, like, that's the heart of Star Wars. Those are the elements that are fan servicey, but in a good way. And I think those types of activities, and that's not even to mention how gracious he is on Twitter. Like, he's super awesome with fans, like Jurassic Park fans. He'll comment on your posts, he'll like them, he'll interact with you. I think there was one of my favorite quotes from him was when somebody was talking about the criticism of Fallen Kingdom, which again is not a perfect movie, but a lot of Jurassic Park fans love it because of just the heart that it has. He's like, I love it when Jurassic Park fans hold my feet to the fire, because that's their passion. That's what they love, and it helps me improve my storytelling for the next time so that I make sure I get it right. And you contrast that with Rian Johnson's reaction to criticism to his movie. I mean, it's just night and day. So I was reading his script, and I was kind of against it. I talked about it on my podcast today. I was kind of against reading this script. I didn't want to do it because I was like, either A, it's going to be amazing, and I'm going to be pissed off that that's not what we got, or B, it's going to suck, and I'm going to be pissed off because my favorite director wrote a crappy movie. So I was like, it's a lose-lose for me. I don't want to read it. I don't want to know. Like, it doesn't matter. It has no bearing on our day-to-day life. I just don't want to know. But because we did it for my podcast, and we also are doing it for this one, I was like, okay, I'll read it. And I really enjoyed it, and I loved how much of a deep cut it was on the Force and the lore and some of the new elements and the character development with, like, Finn going to Coruscant and taking on, I think there was like a whole troop of renegade First Order stormtroopers that Finn was the leader of. I'm like, these are those elements that I'm like, yeah, this seems like it would be obvious, but we didn't get it. So I don't know, though. That's my opinion. I'm a super, like, biased on Colin Trevorrow. I think the guy's awesome, and I would have loved to have seen his version of Episode 9. I'm done. My rant is over.
Yeah, okay, so before I forget, I did want to mention this one thing as well. Okay, so, we're talking about how We didn't see Coruscant. We didn't see some of these planets and names that we are very familiar with. We showed Kylo Ren battling these Sith acolytes on a planet at the beginning of Rise of Skywalker. The planet wasn't named in the film. Later, did we discover that it was Mustafar, and Vader's castle would have been right over the edge there. Why didn't we see that? Why didn't we get that connection? Now, the interesting thing is, Alex and Rob, we had an opportunity to sit with some filmmaking or Star Wars insiders during our Scarif 2019 event here in Chicago, and one thing that was made aware to us, which is genius on George Lucas's part, is the fact that although George Lucas sold Star Wars to Disney, he kept merchandising rights. And I think we're in this weird space where Star Trek is where, because Star Trek and that IP is kind of owned and run, one by the film studios that's Paramount Pictures, and then two by the other entity, which is CBS. They have to kind of keep those separate. So CBS, one of the reasons that they changed the Klingons a lot was because it had to be different than the movie Klingons. So I think we might be in that realm of license crossover where we can't say, we own Disney now, or we own Star Wars now. Disney can't say Coruscant, because then George Lucas is going to get a cut of everything that we do from here forward. So I will not be surprised.
What? Give him a cut.
Yeah, I get it.
Is that the case? Would that be the case?
Okay.
I feel like Dan. Sorry, go ahead.
No, I was gonna say, Dan. Yeah, I was kind of like you. I was like, there's no way that the Lucasfilm lawyers and the Disney lawyers would cut this deal where I don't have full control of the franchise. Like, that doesn't make any sense. But then we had a discussion with our insider, and he was like, no, yeah, that's why. Like, stupid little things, that's why the radar dish is square on the Millennium Falcon, because they can't use the original one, because then it'll infringe on the rights of George Lucas and the old school Star Wars. And I'm like, that's bananas. I couldn't believe that was
Small
a fact.
Things like that,
that's what it is.
And that's one of the biggest reasons that we hardly saw any old school or original trilogy toys during last Christmas and during Force Friday, because Disney just said, we're not going to make any money off of it.
The other example that was given was the red arm on 3PO and Force Awakens was specifically to make it different than regular 3PO, so they didn't have to.
It's so crazy to me, man.
Yeah,
for that toy.
But and obviously now that Rise of Skywalker and this trilogy is done, they're going to go new. They're going to start everything from scratch, where George Lucas doesn't get supposedly any feedback, any royalty off of that, and we'll see what happens. I mean, everything is going to be new from the ground up. So
hopefully it's good.
It's hopefully it is good. Hopefully it is good. What else? Dan, what did you think of Colin's?
Matt Vader coming in with that comment.
Yeah.
For you guys who don't know, Matt Vader is my co-host on my podcast. He's trolling me for fun.
Gotta support it.
That's Alex's story. We all know the truth.
Yeah, we know. Yeah.
Sorry, what was your question there, bro?
No, it's I wanted to find out from you what your thoughts are on Colin's take of Star Wars.
I haven't read the script only because I'm in the same boat as Alex. I'm afraid to read it to think what we could have had. I'm one of those people that when spoilers come out, or people are coming out with scripts before the movie comes out, that kind of stuff, I avoid that like the plague. I like going in blind and seeing what people have created and kind of absorbing it as it comes in. I hate to know what happens prior to that, and it kind of I'm debating whether or not to read this script or not, but I haven't read it yet. But from those images, if they have any relation to that script, just seeing those images, there are some things in there that I would have loved to see, or have seen. But yeah, it's just the awe-inspiring look of even that Star Destroyer over Coruscant, or the battle between Darth Vader and Kylo Ren, Hux committing suicide with Kylo's lightsaber. It looked like it's like the way they handled Hux in this movie. I was like, I'm glad he's a fulcrum, pretty much, right? He's a fulcrum in that point, but like just turn around and go, pew! Like I don't know. It felt like it was like, okay, that's the end of his story. Like I don't know if you guys have read like the Aftermath trilogy. He's a character in that, in flashbacks and stuff, right? And like his childhood was terrible. His father was a dick, and like throughout all of these movies, you could see that kind of the raising of Hux and kind of what he's turned into and why he's the way he is. He had a lot more to give, I feel, as a character than just shooting him in the chest after, you know, like as a comedy kind of piece. Like people laughed at that in the theater when I went. I was just like, I don't know. I was off put by that.
He was completely neutered in The Last Jedi, so much so that he would not have been a formidable enemy to the Resistance in The Rise of Skywalker, in my opinion.
Right.
Which it must have been what JJ was thinking too, because he just treated him like a joke. So, and they brought in this General Pride guy who was like a Tarkin light, and I actually liked the Pride, you know, General Pride. He was pretty cool, but like Hux, they couldn't have done anything other with Hux because his intimidation level had been cut in half after The Last Jedi.
Poe, yeah.
I have to say, Aftermath series made me happy to see Snap Wexley die.
Oh no! Snap Wexley's the best. Greg Grumberg. Oh my God, I disagree with you so much. I love Snap Wexley so much. Partially because I love Mr. Bones, but man, oh man, I love
Mr. Bones. If Mr. Bones was in there, I would have totally wanted him to live. So
the first viewing for The Rise of Skywalker, that's another thing why I didn't like The Rise of Skywalker as much as I should have. But
I have to clarify, I did audiobook on that, so maybe it was just the voice acting for that particular character.
Fair enough.
The audiobook, he was so whiny that I was just like, oh,
yeah. As soon as I saw Snap, he's flying through. He's like, I can't shake him.
Yeah.
And then like seconds later, everybody comes in and everything's good.
Yeah.
It was like his death meant absolutely nothing except for
he was the Akbar of that particular episode.
Yeah, and I just couldn't bear witness to the murdering, literally, of the character and his story. Like he has so much to give with Nora Wexley, Wedge Antilles, who's part of that battle, right? Like it would have been awesome if, like, Greg Grumberg as Snap Wexley's flying through, boom, Poe has a moment, Wedge has a moment. And then everything happened, but it's just like, man, they didn't even give him that.
Yeah,
it's good,
poor
bad
Rose.
and good.
Keep this on the rails, man. I'm sorry.
That's all right. I get very passionate about certain characters. He is one of them.
I love passion, man.
Yeah. Oh man, he's great.
Oh, Matt Vader, Hercule Jerkily.
Hercule Jerkily.
Yeah, there you go. That's
old. What's that guy's name again? I can't remember. Chuck Wendig. There we go.
Chuck Wendig.
Yeah.
Guys, we're going to play Sentry Mode. It's our little quiz, but first I want to thank everyone in the chat for joining us and everybody who might join us after this broadcast is over. And for those of you that helped us reach our goal of road to 1,500, you know, Brad and I started this podcast together right after Celebration in April, and we've grown surprisingly fast, and we love interacting with a lot of folks on here. You know, once we reached 1,500 today, actually, you know, we're going to go ahead and announce the winner of our giveaway at a later time, but I just wanted to give everybody a look to see what I'm giving away for this. It's a wonderful, wonderful book. It's Creating the Worlds of Star Wars, 365 Days. It's a lot of behind-the-scenes images and, great stories behind the scenes of this great saga that we love. Stories from George Lucas, stories from the actors, and I can't wait to give it away.
Great companion for your desk calendar.
Yes, definitely. They make some pretty good books. The 365 Days series is really great. I've got all of them. Oh, I just opened up a page where Greedo is wearing high heels. I love it.
Yes, please.
So we're going to give that out soon. And thank you very much. Thank you, Carl. Thank you, Frank, Amy, everybody else in the chat room. But I think it's time for a little Sentry Mode Q&A.
Definitely congrats on the 1,500. I mean, you guys earned that for sure, Ro, and you are so super active on social media. Well deserved.
Yeah.
Thank you. They call me the media whore.
Well deserved.
Types of horror, that's one of my favorites.
Any closing thoughts before we do the Sentry Mode? We're going to put Dan to the test here.
Yes, please.
All right. I wish I didn't load up my SD card with the little jingle there. But Rob, can you sing our little jingle?
I can't. Every time I think of you guys, I think of Ollie's original jam for your podcast.
Oh yeah. You'll have to search that one.
Right.
So Dan, question number 1. We'll start easy and then we'll start to kind of ramp it up.
Awesome.
Question number 1 in Sentry Mode. What is the name of the creator of the Star Wars saga?
Really? That's a hard one, man.
What's his middle name?
I want to say Kathleen Kennedy, but George Lucas?
George Lucas, that is correct. Question number 2. Who directed Iron Man and what is that director's role in new Star Wars canon?
Jon Favreau, and he's a writer-director on The Mandalorian.
Excellent. Question number 3. What is your favorite part of being a Star Wars fan?
There's a lot. I would say the fandom and the story.
And question number 4. You get 5 questions. Question number 4. If you were to direct a Star Wars, what era would it be in and why?
Boy, that's a hard one. I want to say the original trilogy, but at the same time, I really loved the prequel trilogy as a child, even now. So I'd probably say like just before Episode 1, right in there. And I would definitely jump into more Qui-Gon and the mystical elements of the Force and the difference that each Jedi had of their own connection to the Force. Just kind of diving into that a little bit more. I feel like that would be a really cool movie or TV show or whatever.
Awesome. Yeah. I'll pose that question to the rest of you guys too. Alex, if you were to direct a Star Wars, what era would you pick and why?
I would either go way back to the ancient times, to when the Jedi first became a thing, and there was that split between ideologies of Jedi and Sith, and
when they were battling dinosaurs.
Yes, dinosaurs, absolutely dinosaurs.
I got it.
Or I would go so far into the future, and I would probably kind of dive into the unknown region, possible threats that would come from outside of the known galaxy.
Yuzong Vong.
Yes, exactly. Yes, the Yuzong Vong, and kind of like I would probably have some kind of a new republic, like in its prime, already ready and set to go, with a brand new set of Jedi with probably a different teaching. It would be more of like a gray Jedi. I don't think I would do the hardcore like prequel era Jedi. I would kind of move away from that a little bit and do a little bit more of a gray Jedi area, kind of where Ahsoka leads, and have a group of them have to go up against this external force coming from the outside of the galaxy. That would be my 2 ideas.
Nice. Rob?
I'd totally go 100-year war between the Jedi and the Sith.
Yeah.
There are so many, we've talked about it before, the cutscenes from older public video game. I think that if you were to do something kind of in that style where you could really rev up both the character development, I mean, you get that Han Solo like smuggler, but also to kind of see what the Jedi would have been like at their prime when they were battle tested, going up against the Sith, and the lightsaber battles would be phenomenal. Not to mention some of the Force powers that were clearly lost over the millennia since then. I just think it would be really captivating to see.
Did you guys see somebody had taken a scene, I think one of the first fight scenes from The Witcher, and replaced the swords with lightsabers?
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Did you see the video of the Senate battle between Emperor Palpatine and Baby Yoda?
Yes.
Yeah.
God, that was good. Oh wow, I love that.
By the
Okay,
way,
last-
Baby Yoda
last-
dual wields. By the way,
What was that?
Baby Yoda dual wields.
Yeah.
All right, last question for all of you guys, but Dan is going to take it first. Ready?
Let's do it.
What are the ramifications of the trade guild's inability to concede power to the banking clan? And in 2 sentences, can you break down the Republic's downfall when it comes to its galactic role and societal inefficiencies due to political and financial instabilities?
Yes, I can. It's Sith Jar Jar.
Sith Jar Jar.
Sith
Thank
Jar
you.
Jar.
Thank you. You win.
You win.
Words, Sith Jar Jar.
And as Frank and Amy would say, this is Sentry Mode.
Nice.
Thank you, guys. So good. So once again, Dan, thank you very much for joining us.
Hey, thank
It's been fun. You know, these hours talking Star Wars go by like this. I'm looking up at the clock and I'm like, an hour 45. What the hell?
I wish
But
not short. The last episode was 3 hours.
Are you
Oh my
kidding me?
God. That was just
Yeah.
discussion, man. We had 5 people on. It was nuts.
definitely. Yeah. So Dan, tell the folks where you can find your podcast.
Sure, yeah. You can find us on Twitter, Facebook /VoiceForcePod. You can find us at voiceforce.com, SoundCloud, Stitcher, TuneIn, Apple Podcasts, Google Play Podcasts, basically any major podcatcher out there. Just look for Voice of the Force or Voice of the Force Podcast. You'll find it. And any new listeners out there, let us know what you think of the podcast. If you hate it, tell us what we could do better. If you love it, tell us what you loved about it. If not, then enjoy the Scarif podcast where it's always sunny.
Awesome. I started listening to one of your latest ones on there.
Oh, yeah.
It's good stuff. Yeah.
Nice.
And Mr. Jedi Temple Archives, how can people find you?
Certainly, you can get a hold of all of our episodes anywhere you listen to podcasts. Certainly at our website at jtapodcast.com, via email at jtapodcast@gmail.com, on the socials, basically Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and Pinterest at JTA Podcast. And we also have a new voicemail that you can reach us at if you want to go that route. I believe the number is 201-746-JTAP. So definitely reach out to us that way if you would like to. And shout out to, well, first and foremost, Ro, I got to tell you, don't think that I didn't catch the fact that that last question you asked Dan was a total ripoff of one you asked Brad earlier.
Ooh,
Yeah. So,
I get some new material, bro.
right. Time for some new material. But yeah, definitely looking forward to more fireside chats in the future. And we should be having conversations on this week to talk a little Mandalorian. So that
Yeah.
should be a good time.
Yeah, I like pulling that question out every so often because it's always fun to read.
What answer have you got
And-
to that question?
I don't know. People just
Okay.
throw things at me.
That's fair. That's fair.
And Alex, the Salty Nerd podcast, you guys recorded your episode today, and I can't wait to listen to it when you release it. Tell us where we can find you.
All right. Hi, everybody. I am Alex. I am the Salty Nerd, and you can catch me on Twitter at Salty Nerd or Instagram at Salty Nerd Podcast. And you can check out my podcast on iTunes, Spotify, and Stitcher. And if I get my butt in gear, sometimes YouTube, but not a lot. We do commentary on all things movies. It's not just one subject. It's pretty much any movie across the board, whether it be nerd or drama or just Oscars, Joker, comic books, Star Trek, Star Wars, pretty much everything that we are a fan of, we dive into and talk about. I have an accomplished writer as part of my group, so he always takes me to film school and to writing school during our podcast and explains to me exactly why something sucks. So that's always fun to hear. And then we have, of course, Matt Vader, who was in the chat earlier. He's a great nerd. He's been a lifelong watcher of Star Wars and Star Trek and all that stuff. So we have a ton of fun. We laugh a lot and we have a lot of salt. We get snarky and we get kind of nitpicky about things sometimes, but it's all in good fun. And we have a ton of fun doing it as a group. So if you guys want to check that out, you can watch our episodes listen to our episodes on iTunes and Spotify. And yeah, that's it. We have a new episode coming out. If I can get it edited tonight, which might not happen. It'll be up tomorrow, if not probably Friday. So keep an eye out for those. That new episode. It's going to be like almost 2 hours long, I think, because we kind of ran long today. And also Patreon. We can do Patreon content. We have a ton of fun there. All the things that I'm too embarrassed to put in public. If you pay $1, you can listen to it on Patreon.
The paywall.
$1, you can listen to me and my friends get drunk and talk about a dumb TV show that we don't like. It was quite fun, quite the experience, and I love making content for you guys and for all our listeners. It's a great hobby to have, and I'm glad to have a great community and to have guys like Ro support us. So yeah, go check that out.
Fantastic. I can't wait for that episode. I usually listen to the Salty Nerd on my way to and fro at crime scene. I work NBC here in Chicago, so I got to kind of discombobulate my brain from covering all that news, and I do it by listening to nerds talk about movies.
Nice.
Wise choice.
So, us too, we have a voicemail. If you guys want to leave us a message, we have actually our new podcast recording is Alex and I, we're going to get together later on this week to record our regular podcast. We do have a voicemail. We've been having some folks leave messages regarding their feelings about the end of the trilogy, and we'll go ahead and play those with during that episode. But we have a voicemail. It is 773-234-8659 if you guys want to leave us a recorded message, and we'll definitely listen and most likely put it on the podcast for other folks to hear. Thank you again, everyone. Don't forget to everybody in the chat and whoever's watching this afterwards, listen and subscribe and like us on all the social medias. We love creating this stuff. We have a lot of fun interacting with everybody on social media. That's why we're here, and we hope you enjoy our Star Wars shenanigans. And until next time, that's the Scuttlebutt. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.